In today's webinar, you will learn the long-term stability, how to get long-term stability through strategic management. It's one of the most three important things creating institutions, have great student learning and outcomes. I did find the recording button, so we're now recording this. If you have questions, feel free to just type them into the box on the side of your menu. And for those of you who stay to the end, we'll have a free gift. So let's start off. Does this sound like your institution? Your enrollments are down or they're trending down. Your revenues aren't meeting your current expenses. You're in deficit spending. You're borrowing from your endowment, or you don't have an endowment or a bank account to be able to rely back on. You don't have an institutional strategic plan, or it's not being followed or updated on an annual basis. There's no academic strategic plan, or it's not in sync with your institution's strategic plan. Your faculty senate is obstructionist instead of adding to the value of the mission. Faculty at your institution think they should have a greater say in everything, and they don't listen to reason. Frankly, it's easier herding cats than working with some faculty. Does this sound like your institution? These are all symptoms of an institution not being in alignment and attunement. And even if it's off in just a few degrees, it can cost the institution significant dollars, enrollments will drop, and people just won't be happy working there. T.J. Rogers said at one point, most companies don't fail for lack of talent or strategic vision. They fail for a lack of execution. The routine blocking and tackling that great organizations consistently do well and strive to do better. This applies so much with education institutions. Some of the business issues that we've polled, we recently did a poll of a number of leaders of higher education. And this was a poll on a scale of 1 to 10. This was the cabinet, your chief executive officer, your chancellor, your board, your VPs of the business units, their provost and deans. This is what they said. The number one thing they're concerned about is affordability of education. Second, the increasing reliance of tuition on revenues. And thirdly, decreasing or stagnant revenues. These are all, the top three, these are the same things that Inside Higher Ed came out with for their 2016 survey of chief business officers, i.e. the chief financial officers. They believe, 63% believe that the media reports of a financial crisis in higher education are accurate. Nearly 2/3 think their institution's sustainable, but over the next few years, but fewer than that, over 50% feel like over the next decade it's going to have problems. Most business officers do not feel faculty participate in a meaningful way in the campus discussions around budget. And they believe that they should do more of a role. So you're starting to see some disconnects between faculty, between the business side of the house, between what people think and what they're doing, and big concerns around affordability of education and tuition. So what we say is maybe this is the new normal. You've got a number of traditional college-age students that's decreasing. The big growth is in the non-traditional, the working adults. Students are believing there's less value in higher ed. This is one of the key things that cabinet members are very concerned about. If they see less value, they're not willing to pay the money. Here's another big one that cabinet level folks believe. 95% of all institutions look alike. They teach the same subjects, they have the same degrees and the same programs. That's a real problem because what differentiates your institution? Nothing. So what does it become? It becomes distance from home becomes more of a factor in a choice. For public institution, most of them go within 18 miles. Privates, 46 miles, and community colleges, 8 miles. So really, has education become a commodity? I hate to think so, but in many people's perspective, especially the people who are purchasing higher ed as a tool for them to get ahead, it definitely is. My buddy Albert has said many times, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Well, with the election that we've just had, we can't do that. It's being forced upon us to change, and change we must. So we're going to talk about today about a number of the things that need to be thought about in different ways in higher education. And hopefully you'll be able to put these into action in the near future. There are 3 requirements that we believe you have to have for creating a vibrant higher education institution. First, you need to think of things from a holistic perspective. The leadership has to focus on big picture and measure outcomes, not processes. Again, we'll get into all these in a deeper way very shortly. Second, has to be organizational and delivery alignment. And this really boils down to the planning and the change are the primary job of leaders. And lastly, stakeholder attunement. This is shared vision. It's people supporting what they help create. So the first one of these we'll talk about is holistic thinking, focusing on the outcomes and serving the customer. First, let's define what a holistic system is. A holistic system really is thinking about how something is the output. If you take a look at an airplane, which is something near and dear to my heart because I used to fly airplanes similar to these, you'll look at it, you don't look at it as a propeller, you don't look at it as a tail, you don't look at it as a set of wings, you look at it as a plane. And what is a plane supposed to do? The one on the left is a trainer, it all drops ordnance. The left is a 747, which flies people from place to place. That's the mission and the vision, is get people place to place with a system. So their systems are really made up of a set of components that work together for an overall objective. There's 2 ways of thinking about systems. You have analytic ways of thinking, and then you have holistic or systemic ways of thinking. From an analytic perspective, and this is all foundational piece for what we're getting into, so I apologize for possibly boring you with details. But the analytic thinking starts with today and the current state, the issues and the problems, and then it breaks those issues and problems into their smallest components and solves them separately. And really, there isn't any far-reaching goal or vision, just eliminating the problem. I mean, we see this all the time with enrollment management. It's like, okay, we need to make sure that our process is working, that financial aid is talking, and these are all things that are important. But does that really get down to the root of the problem, which may be you're not positioned properly or you don't have a good plan? Probably not. Holistic or systems thinking really looks at the whole as primary and the parts are the secondary, not the opposite, what analytic thinking does. It focuses on achieving the vision and it measures outcomes, not processes. So those are 2 critical things that we go along. So we're going to get to the first of our polls today, and that first one is, does your institution have a strategic plan? So we're going to go ahead and launch this poll. And if you'll go ahead and vote for me, please, that would be great. So we've seen a few people voted here. We're waiting for a couple more. Okay, and we've got a good majority, and just close the poll, and that's pretty much what everybody thought. Yeah, everybody's got a strategic plan. Really good. That's what you should. So the second poll, did you participate in its formation in a meaningful way? So we'll go ahead and launch that poll. So we're seeing kind of a breakdown here. Some people yes, some people no. We'll give it just a couple more seconds here. Okay. We'll go ahead and close the poll and share that. And that's about half and half, which is pretty darn good. Most folks, when we do this, we have about a third who participate in a meaningful way, and about 2/3 don't. Now, I'm hoping that we've got mostly cabinet level folks who participate in the plan, but you know, if it's not, if it's the faculty or rank and file, that's great. That you're doing things the way they need to be done. So we'll go ahead and hide that. And we've got one more poll here, and we'll keep on going. When you did participate in your plan, does it begin with your current state, or does it begin with your vision of where you want to go, or something else? So we'll go ahead and launch the poll here. Okay, so we've got quite a number of folks who voted so far. Real good. We'll give the poll a couple more seconds. And we'll close it off. And there's the results. This is real good. People are starting with the vision. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but that's really great. That's the way things should start, is with the vision of where you're going. So let's talk about the enemy of holistic thinking, and we'll tie back into those polls in just a minute, I promise you. So back to my flying metaphor, this is the cockpit of the F-15. It's pretty complex. Back in the 60s when it was designed, it really was state-of-the-art. It was great stuff. You can see you've got an awful lot of stuff here. These are mostly your engine instruments here, your attitude gyro, your compass, your altimeter is here, you've got vertical speed indicator, your radios, things along those lines, your stick, and your, different things here. So you can see it's got everything you really need, radar screens, things like that. Here is the F-35 cockpit, state of the art. You can see it's got a lot of stuff with computer generated. Here is your stick right here. It's based on that rather than being in the middle. This is a view from the top looking down over the seat. Obviously, it's a lot simpler because you've got the use of the technology. But here's the thing. The F-15 was designed by engineers. The F-35 was designed with the pilot in mind on how they do the workload. This was designed from a systemic or a holistic perspective. This one was designed more from an analytic perspective. You can see the difference. You've got to keep it simple. The cure of analytic thinking is you've got to keep the higher perspective. You've got to focus on the outcomes. Those are the critical things. So here's the next poll, and this is really one of the cruxes of higher ed. Who is your customer? So if you'll go ahead and take a couple of seconds and vote on this, please. I'm always curious to see how this comes up. Starting to get a few folks in here. Okay. Give people a couple more seconds to vote here. Okay, we'll close the poll and share that. 60% of the group said that it's all the above. It's the student, the parents, and the business employers. I tend to agree with you, but I'll throw in one caveat. When you think of a university as part of the talent supply chain, Who really is your customer? You know, high school students, they have to be able to focus on what they're doing, their extracurricular activities, focus being, you know, their major. What do they want to do? In college, they've got to figure out what their major is, their internships, their extracurricular activities. These all need to point toward them getting their first job. One of the things that institutions of higher learning do a very poor job at is understanding, first off, who their customer is, who's going to buy their product being the graduated students. And secondly, how do they differentiate that student so that industry wants to buy their people, or they want to hire their people? You've got faculty who are very much and should be developing curriculum. They are the experts. But I'm arguing that there needs to be, there's my academic coming out, I'm arguing there needs to be a greater shared vision between faculty and administration on what's important to be taught. That's one of the critical things of looking at things holistically, looking at education institutions holistically. How many of your institutions actually have panels of industry, of business, of organizations who hire your graduates and help you to figure out what they need for skills, what needs to be taught in the classroom? That's one of those critical pieces that need to happen and doesn't happen very often. So we're going to come to the second portion of this, the organization, delivery, and alignment. We talked a little bit earlier about planning and change are the primary job of leadership. On this one, we take a look at the normal business product cycle. We typically have a concept creation, you know, maybe a program, market development, business optimization, and then you're bringing in all your fruit, harvesting the graduates over time, but then things drop off if they're not renewed. This is where your leadership has to come in. They've got to start reinventing the business. They need to start putting in new programs that will attract students in a much better way. This is another piece of that holistic thinking of where leadership need to be working on getting things going. And the last thing, we're going to go into this much more in detail here just in a minute, but the last thing we're going to talk about, attunement, or sustaining the progress, leading, follow, or get out of the way. For those of you who have been to Los Angeles, this is a picture of the Bonaventure Hotel. This is the 4th floor here, and during construction, there was a group of folks, the architect, the engineers, and the foreman were down figuring out, believe it or not, they had forgotten to put in the elevators, which are right here. And one of the workers walked by and was curious of what they were doing, and they didn't think the person could add any value, but they asked anyway, what's going on? And they said, well, how do we get the elevators? And he took a look at the plans and said, put them on the outside. Well, if you've been to Los Angeles at night, you'll see these elevators, and there's 4 of them on each of the towers. They're lit up blue, yellow, green, and red, corresponding with each of the towers. It's a beautiful sight. This is some of the things that can happen when you have people supporting what you help create. People want input in decisions that will affect them before the decision is made. So let's get into some of these holistic approaches to higher education institution. We've talked about thinking holistically about university management. And this is a very simplified plan on how things happen, starting with what is the environment that you're operating. If you'll notice, this says future environment. It doesn't say current environment. This really is based on 5 strategic questions. Like, where do you want to be? Your ideal future vision. How is the future going to change on our way there? How are we going to know when we get there? Our measures and our feedback. Where are we now? That current state assessment. Most of us know that as a SWOT. And then your business strategies, the plans and priorities is how do you get there? This D, and the change structures. This is a very simplified version of a much more complex form, which I'll show you going forward. This portion, we're talking about those holistic structures, that holistic processes for university management. This is GE's strategic management process. As you can see, it's pretty complex. You know, their fiscal year is July to June. So they start off with, in July, you know, the implementation, and then starting in August, and September, they're already figuring out what they want to be doing going forward, so that when they roll it out, they can have these things. We're going to show you one of these to apply it to an education institution here shortly. But it's very clear that GE, they understand where they're going. So that first step really is charting the course. One of my favorite cartoons, Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll. Would you please tell me which way I ought to go from here? That depends on a good deal of where you want to go, said the cat. I don't care much. Then it really doesn't matter which way you go. Unfortunately, too many institutions of higher education put these same things into practice, not consciously, but subconsciously, because they don't start with a clear vision of what they need to do. So here's the next poll of what we're going to do. How many of your, quote, customers know what you stand for, know who you are and what you stand for, what you do? Of course, this presupposes that you've polled your customers, i.e. the business units, or I'm sorry, business entities, the people who hire your graduates. So we've had a few people vote here. We'll give folks a little bit more time to vote. So we're coming up to a majority here. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay. So we'll close the poll and share the results. This is actually higher than what I had expected it to be. Normally when I talk about these things, it's usually about 80-20. 80% don't know what their customers want, i.e. the people who are hiring their graduates. So commendations to y'all that you really know this stuff. This is good. So let's talk a little bit about competitive advantage and positioning. For those of you who have done a 5 forces competitive analysis or something like that, this is going to be old hat for you. But these are things that institutions of higher education really need to figure out. Positioning really is the driving force. It's how we're going to differentiate ourselves versus the competition. And if you think back to some of the first things we talked about, those new normals for higher ed, that pool of students is shrinking. And so when it shrinks, differentiation is that much more critical than it's ever been. It needs to be really the core, the mother of all core strategies. And it's how we sustain that competitive advantage over the competition versus time. So what is positioning and competitive advantage? Positioning answers that question. What is that one thing that's unique, it's different, it's better about us? In the eyes of the customer, in the eyes of who's hiring your graduates, and in some respects in your students as well, because they have to be able to identify that as well. and it's differentiated versus the competition in the marketplace. Why is it that they want to do business with you? In some respects, an education institution, university, a college, needs to be thought about as a manufacturing plant. You're bringing your raw materials, the student out of high school or the student who's coming there for education, an adult learner, someone like that. You're educating them, that's the manufacturing floor, and then you're kicking them out at the end of the assembly line, which is getting them ready for someone to hire them. Okay, that's one way of thinking of it. And in some respects, education institutions should be thinking about their positioning and their institution like that. You know, the question is can you really be competitive if you try and do everything for students? You know, this is looking at it from the perspective of customer service and how to create value. And every institution needs to think about this in two ways. They need to think about it, their service and how they do things, and they need to think about it from a positioning perspective of what curriculum they're doing. You know, there are some universities that I know of who, especially for-profits, who are looking at it from a total cost perspective. You know, they try and get their tuition as low as possible, and in some cases even try and make it to where tuition assistance or grants will cover the entire amount of the tuition. Responsiveness. Do they get response back to their students in time, their prospective students? You know, are they there always? Do they have lots of caring service? Do they have lots of advisors to be able to help them through the process? Is it super high quality, you know, like a Harvard, an Ivy League, things along those lines? This is all ways that they create value. Well, one of the things is, where are you with each of the star factors in the competitive positioning? Are you unique? Are you different? Are you better than the competition? That's your competitive advantage. You know, are you competitive versus your competition? Or are you uncompetitive versus the competition, below the curve? These are all things that every institution needs to figure out. This is how you approach your customers. This is how you approach your students. There's another piece to this. What's your positioning and your differentiation? Okay, differentiation can go in two ways. It can go as part of your competitive advantage, or it can also go with your curriculum. You know, who are your competitors? Do you know who they are? How do your degree programs match up against them? Are they the same or are they different? Remember, the poll that we took earlier, 95% of all cabinet members believe that their programs look identical to everybody else's. You know, do you differentiate yourself like Cornell as hospitality management, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, gaming and hospitality management, Harvard Medical, Harvard Law, Harvard Business, Stanford Entrepreneurship? Are you doing all those things that are really necessary to make sure that you're positioned and differentiated? And what is it you want to be known for from the people who hire your graduates? So we're thinking about all these things in a holistic way. What's the future environment going to look like? How do you position yourself in that future environment? That's critical stuff. So really, holistic thinking comes down to, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. That's everything about holistic thinking. The next key to all this is ensuring alignment. Remember, we talked at the beginning, holistic thinking, alignment, and attunement. So alignment. Alignment is one of those things, it's like a diamond model. It's invisible to the naked eye. It's hiding plainly in sight. You know it when you see it, and that's one of the critical things. Okay, here's an example of alignment. Everyone's working toward a common goal, a common vision. Everybody knows what they need to do. Here's here's something that people, shows that's out of alignment. The faculty and administration are at odds with one another with respect to what they're being taught. One university that I know of, a battlefield medic wanted to come into the university and, done emergency tracheotomies on a battlefield, advanced emergency medicine. He wanted to go into a nursing program or a physician's assistant program. I don't recall which one it was. The only thing they would give him credit for his military service was physical education. Come on, folks. The guy has acted as a doctor on the medical field, and all you're going to do is give him credit for that. He went to another university. This is an example of the faculty who control the articulation and making sure that somebody matches up for their degree programs being at odds with administration. The positioning matching with the mission and visions with centers of excellence. How many institutions have centers of excellence around what they're really good at? There aren't many. There's a few. Some universities think they do everything great, which is, really kind of crazy, but, they do. Measurements are focused on outcomes versus institutions frequently missing their numbers because they're not focused on making the outcomes work, because focused on processes. They've got alignment of their strategies, their structures, and the processes versus attempting to do too many things at once and nothing gets finished properly. Or lastly, a good balance of leadership and management versus faculty governance running amok. Remember, the sharpest knife cannot cut its own handle. You really need to understand how these things are in alignment, and if you've got one center of excellence and everything else isn't working, you're really not in alignment. So this is kind of what alignment looks like. You've got your organization-wide strategic plan with its vision, mission, values. You've got a number of business units, your academics, your enrollments, your financial aid, et cetera, and then you've got your support areas, your HR, your finance, your legal, marketing, sales, et cetera. They've got core strategies which run through, and we'll get to core strategies in just a minute. They've got operating plans and budgets, performance reward systems, and all of these are there for creating the customer value. And then you've got your plans. You've got strategic plans, you've got business plans, departmental plans, and then individual goal planning, or individual planning and goal setting. This is how you align all these things. Now let's take a look at a typical university structure. It's not this simple, is it? We wish it was. This is more like what it is. This comes from, I believe, the University of Kansas. Well, here's what it really looks like. You can see all of these little buckets in here. How do you get all of these things? Academic affairs with the different colleges here. You've got administration, finance. You've got general counsel, audit, research, tech transfer, campus life, students, athletics, equal opportunity. How do you get all of these folks working on the same page? It's darn near impossible sometimes. But if you have core strategies that go through all the different areas, the A, B, C, D, E, the different divisions within your institution, and the core strategies go across those, which are broken up by departmental plans and individual plans, you get that alignment. Now, this is not a process that happens overnight, but if you take a look, it's like a deck chair. Everyone remembers the old deck chairs we used to have around the pool. It's like a web that they go through, and if you're measuring outcomes, you can start to see where the dissonance is. You can start to see where things are dropping through the cracks. So this is alignment. This is a critical piece. One last piece. People. Not the attunement, but the Jim Collins version of you've got to have the right people on the bus and they got to be sitting in the right seats. When we advise institutions, we tell them to hire for attitude. But there's more than that. There's got to be attitude as well as skill set. People can learn on the job, but you've got to have the right people in the right place, and you've got to train them. This is one of the big things that higher ed institutions don't do well, is training new people coming on board. If you take a look at the poll for employee engagement, which has been done by Gallup and it's very, very well known out there, employee engagement starts with the job interview process. That's how somebody gets their first initial impressions about your institution, and it goes all the way through how they're interacted. One of those with throughout the process, but once they're in the institution as well. One of the big things that they look at is the onboarding process, how they become part of it. How many folks ended up just, here's your desk, your classes start in X days. Or is there a indoctrination program, an orientation that says, this is what we're about, this is what we believe in, this is who we are, these are who our students are, get to know them, and they give a good orientation. That's the way that you create engagement. That's the way that you put the right people on the right bus and in the right seats. So lastly, stakeholder attunement. This is one of the critical things. Now, how many folks have ever had projects that look like this? It's a fact that 80% of all change efforts fail to get the expected results. And this is what they look like. This requires leadership. And leadership is one of those critical things that higher ed institutions really do, I hate to say it, a poor job at. It's more, leadership is more like this. Is your project plan done? I can't do a plan until you tell me the strategy. My strategy is to make you do a plan. Sometimes leadership just radiates from my body. Higher ed, especially in the faculty ranks, hires a dean or whatever, not so much because they know how to lead, but they know how to do research. That's not the right way to hire folks. You've got to hire people and then train them in leadership and management. Why is that? Well, unlike institutions in the past where you had to just worry about one stakeholder, institutions of higher ed have got to worry about multiple stakeholders. You've got faculty, alumni, communities, businesses, parents, students, administration. Okay. You've got a lot of alumni here. So let's look at one of these students here at the beginning. When your enrollment rates go down, you don't bring in as many students. When your persistence rates go down, you lose students, which means you lose financial, you lose finances, you lose dollars. But those students hopefully become alumni. Alumni is the source of giving to an institution. So if you're not taking care of your students coming in, you could be losing out from alumni donations. If you don't take care of the businesses and teach students what they need, then are you going to have the support that you need from the businesses to hire graduates? An example of that, a colleague of mine went to a very large R2 institution, one of the top ones in the country. He studied entrepreneurship. Fabulous education on theory. They could spout off all the different theories about starting a business. He had no idea how to go out and get a business license. something that's critical in just about every place you go. So how do you make sure that you take care of all these various stakeholders? You have to have a shared vision to do that. And the way we talk about that is planning plus attunement. When we develop a strategic plan for an institution, we do what we call the stakeholder attunement process, which is bouncing the plan off at every stage of the process. So we develop something with the core team, we take it out to the key stakeholders and have dialogue, and we make adjustments based on their input. This creates that shared vision and attunement that's necessary to be successful in today's higher ed environment. It also eliminates resistance to change. And we've all seen resistance to change. Most institutions, when they toss out a new initiative, they use the 3 Ds of implementation and change: decide, deliver, and then defend. That doesn't work, not in higher ed. And that's where you get the faculty and the administration at odds with one another, one of the places. You've got to build in this stakeholder attunement process so that you don't get resistance to change. Because really, resistance to change, people choose to change or not to change based on their own mental models, the way that they think and they trust that they have in their leadership. That's really the bottom line for resistance to change, or not having it. Or in other words, they don't get it, they don't like it, or they don't like you. That's the bottom line. Okay. So this attunement piece is not easy to get. We get our best answers from intense dialogue, something that we're really good at here at my firm is creating those intense dialogues and thoughts that create a better plan. We had a great example of this. We did a strategic plan for an Air Force wing whose mission had changed from doing air refueling to doing unmanned aerial reconnaissance vehicles. Well, that's a huge swap in mission. So we had a core planning team, and then for the stakeholder attunement process, they would fly in their key leaders from all over the country. And of course, they had access to their own jets, so they could easily do this. But they would bring them in, and they would discuss these type of things. They'd fly 60 people in for these meetings. Well, they had a fabulous plan, and when they rolled it out in an auditorium to 500 people, they had standing ovations. It was like a rock event. So that's what we do. Now we're coming up close to the end here. Stick around. We've got a couple of free gifts for you. So in taking a look at the holistic management, let's put it all together. We've got another poll here. Most institutions are in this traditional level, the annual planning or even having strategic planning with business unit planning. But there are very few of them that pull in all of these pieces. So I'm just kind of curious here in our second to last poll, where is your institution in its reaction? So if you take a look, the reactive is, just survival. You're doing budgets. You've got financial objectives. Are you doing annual planning, the traditional annual planning, 3-year forecasts, annual retreats, mission values, and then getting to the, more proactive where you've got business unit plans, strategic planning, and then the system that we're talking about. So we've got the majority of folks who voted at this point in time, so we'll give people just maybe, yeah, there we go. We got pretty much everybody there, so I'm close to it. So we'll go ahead and close the poll here. This is not surprising. Pretty much everybody is in this survival and the reactive mode. That's too bad. You need to get moved up more to this holistic way of approaching things, because that really is going to improve your enrollments and your revenues going forward. So we've talked a little bit about the holistic university management structures. Let's take a look at what this looks like from a step-by-step perspective. You know, starting up here, we're looking at the future state. We're looking at the customer values, where we're going to go. And actually, we really start with the future environmental scan up here at the top. Then we get to future environmental scan and then the ideal future vision. So then we come on down, mission, the core values, the positioning. We come to our key success measures or our metrics. How do we know when we get there? And notice one thing, we've got this stakeholder alignment process at each step that we go along. We've got a current state assessment, SWOT. From there, we start the strategy development, making sure that we get the alignment of the delivery and the attunement of the people. We do our 3-year business plans. We do our annual plans, strategic budgets. Again, we assess the current state. We get to the plan to the implement, okay? Because we've done the strategy plan, but most institutions do not do an implementation plan. This is critical for what you need to do. And then, you know, the implementation. And then the biggie here, that annual strategic review and update. That is so critical to happen. So this is a very simplified diagram of what happens. So what's it look like? Remember the GE diagram? Well, here's one for higher ed institutions. Assuming, again, a July to June. In January, you're starting off with your initial planning for the year. February, you're talking about the possibilities. You've got your executive committee and cabinet of the board and cabinet retreat. You know, what are the early learnings? You know, what's the reaction, faculty, students? You'll see here hypo recommendations, high performers. You know, who are the folks that we want to start looking at to move up the leadership line, to start taking over in things. GE, one of their biggest strengths that they have is their leadership and management development. That's why so many GE executives are now leading Fortune 500 companies, because they left GE for another thing. They get recruited. You know, you see surveys, you know, the silent shopper surveys. Finalizing plans, the board approving meetings. Again, even in August, you're already starting to think about what are you going to be doing for the next year. So you've got all of these things that happen on an annual basis. This gets systematized into the culture of your institution. That is what makes it so critical to do these things. So people ask us frequently how we do it. So what we do is we come in and we assess an institution for its strengths, for its areas to grow. We assess the external environment for how you position it. You know, we tie this to job growth. What is it the employers need? We position institutions so that they're unique, and then we brand it or have them brand it. Carnegie Mellon is a great example of this type of thing. Not that we worked with them. Carnegie Mellon is known for technology and most recently artificial intelligence, MIT engineering. People, it's synonymous. Carnegie Mellon, artificial intelligence. MIT, engineering, and now business. These are positioned, they're branded. People know that if you want, you know, I'm a ramblin' wreck from Georgia Tech and a heck of an engineer. You know, they've even got songs about the branding for Georgia Tech. That's not to say that you can't do other programs, but you've got that one core program that you get branded for. We then facilitate the strategic and academic long-term plans with the stakeholder attunement process and metrics. We help you build your 1 to 3 year operational plans, again, with the stakeholder attunement process and metrics. We help you develop the change management plan that includes org redesign, change management structures, including governance structures if necessary, incentive rewards, program review, replacement, and then we help you, coach you through implementing these change management plans. And lastly, we help you build capacity via training and coaching. So this is how we do it, and we've done this with a number of different projects, either as individuals within the organization or as a consulting firm outside of the organization. So some of them we've been able to find some great savings, like LA Unified. You know, we found them $225 million in annual savings. So these are just some of the things that we've done. Our clients tell us some really great things, which I'm not going to dwell on too much. So we're coming up to the end of our time together, and just one reminder, we can't solve the problems with the same level of thinking we use to create them. We have to take it to that next level, that holistic perspective. So with that, I'm going to see if we've got any questions here. I know we had a few. Let's see here. I've got a. Okay. Not seeing a lot of great comments, but no real questions. So thank you very much. So I'm going to stop the recording at this point. I'll thank everyone for your participation, and then we're going to